Welcome back to Fire Emblem Thracia 776. This is Chapter 11. Now, this chapter is not going to play out the way that you think it's going to play out. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about what it looks like in kind of a normal run or a normal approach to this chapter. So, when they talk in the beginning here, you get the whole storyline of Olwen and Fred and this guy named Kempf, who is the boss of this chapter. How he is a tyrant, and these guys are actually good guys, more or less. They're just being misled by their superiors. And Owen's going to get thrown in prison, and Fred is going to get thrown into this middle section where you can see the armor knights, actually, even here in the intro. He's going to be in that space above the middle armor knight there. And these armor knights all kind of just move around randomly, and there are some soldiers below them as well, outside of this room. And you just have to take care of them. And then once Leaf steps into the center section, a trap is sprung, and that makes some ballista appear on the left and right sections, inside where you can see those stairs and narrow hallways and such. So that can be especially dangerous for Leaf. If you're Ironmanning, this is where your run could end if you're not prepared or you don't know what's going to happen. You could go in there when there's still enemies in there as well, compounding the situation. Luckily, if you got the rescue staff in the previous chapter, you might be able to get him to safety even in a blind run, but that's not going to apply here. But luckily I know everything about the game, so it's not a big deal. At least not now. So this beginning part here is the most annoying part, because all of your units have to get through these trees. And so I like to come to this chapter pretty light overall. I don't like to bring too many ground units, especially, well, everybody's a ground unit at this point except for Karen, but what I mean is I don't like to bring too many units like Dhalsim, who I just picked up with Karen. And you have to position yourself in such a way that you're not going to be ambushed too hard by this group of soldiers, and there's a couple of archers in there that have killer bows, so you got to be a little bit careful there. That they could take you by surprise. But I didn't bring too many units that just can't really participate, unlike that last chapter where I had units like Ronin for some reason. But these units here in the beginning, even the armor knights, are no match for a trained Finn or Fergus or whomever. Especially if they have their support partners in range, it's just a massacre. So if you're approaching this normally, and you want to make sure that you get the guide and everything, what I would recommend you bring are like a bunch of mounted units, even if they're more or less useless. Just anybody who's like Kane and Alva level of usefulness, just have Finn and Fergus move out first, units like that, and just have the other units catch up while you take care of these enemies, because you're going to have a bit of time to clear them out. And on any mounted units, have door keys, and bring at least one of your thieves with a lockpick. Because once you enter that center area, 3 doors will appear in that lower, like, narrow hallway in between that open area where all my units are and that square room where Fred is. And even if you block those spaces, those doors will appear. So the best thing to do is just have mounted units like in those spaces or like kind of nearby, so they can possibly use the door key once you enter that space, because it happens during your turn. So if you've already moved most of your units, once you've triggered it, you might be kind of screwed. Although it's only 2 ballista, so you have a chance of coming out on the alive end of things, so to speak. But you can canto away with your mounted units, and if you need to, you can even use your thieves and like have them rescued away if you want to save door keys, which sometimes I do if I'm micromanaging. But this beginning part is easy enough where I actually like to capture these guys with killer bows, even though like even if you're using both like Selfina and Tanya, like I am here. Tanya can't use killer bows for a while until she either promotes or just gets a ton of experience. And Selfina is like mildly useful in many chapters, but never like a true workhorse. So even if you steal all these killer bows, you might end up selling some anyway, but that's fine, honestly, because there's a chapter coming up where you can buy stamina drinks, which is pretty good. There's even a chapter, the next mainline chapter, you can buy wind tomes, I think. It's one of the few places where you can. And those are arguably the best basic tome in the game, because they end up generating more avoid for you because of their weight, and I think that's the only factor. But once you get to this part of the map, once you've cleared that initial group, what you just want to do is bait these armor nets out, and you should know that they have door keys and vulneraries and such. So if you can at all surgically capture them or steal and rescue, it might be a good idea. It's like a good low stress way of dealing with the door key problem, which is that you want to eventually stock up on them. They're pretty cheap, but I think a lot of players just kind of put it off, even if they know that they're going to need some, and that can be a problem. So what you want to do when you're ready is you put Leaf in the center, and then you open all the doors, and then in order to unlock the Gaiden, you need Fred to escape down. So you need to make sure he has room to move throughout that hallway at least a little bit. You don't want to have every unit clogging it, although I'm not sure why you would unless you're an absolute insane individual who just wants to see which of your units can survive the onslaught of ballista bolts, which I may or may not have done in the past. But once he escapes from the bottom, as long as you complete the map within 30 turns from that point on, you're fine. And you unlock the Gaiden. This is a map that you can warp skip, but even if Fred is alive at the end of it, and he hasn't had to go through the whole bit with the trap, then you won't get the Gaiden. So you have to go through this whole story segment. There's no way around it. And if you try and get rid of the boss first, and then you try and go back in with Leaf, it also won't trigger, to my knowledge. I've never tested that, actually. But yeah. Because the boss is the one who's proud of the trap and wants to trigger it. By the way, these little parts of the wall that have crumbled here, near where the ballista appear, you cannot break those under any circumstances. Funny story, there's a map later on where, at least one map later on, where armor knights are able to break down those walls. So one time I was like, what if you bring Dulcin and put him in front of those walls? What if that breaks them? And I was so excited to test this out, and it turns out that doesn't do anything. There's no way to do that. What I will tell you, though, is what I found out from watching Japanese players play this game and talk about this game is that I didn't realize that mountain range on the far left, there is actually space for Karen to go in there. So if you have her lance rank trained up to the point where she can use javelins and her strength isn't too terrible, she can actually kill that ballista. You cannot do that on the right. but you can do that on the left, and I don't see players trying to take advantage of that very often, like English-speaking players, or just any other European language, because this game does exist in patches in other languages like French and Spanish, I think. But anyway, I think mainly the reason people don't do it is probably just because training Karen up is a real pain. So there's that. But I actually ended up making this whole bit with the armors needlessly complicated, and I think at one point there might have been, well, I'll just let it play out so you can see. But what I did was I got too cute with capturing, and that's... I had plenty of door keys, honestly. Like, look, I've got 3 on these characters alone. And I had plenty of stuff to sell so that I could buy more door keys later. So it's... I shouldn't have been doing this. Please don't do this here. Look, I mean, Selfina's getting treated like a pincushion here. And luckily this other Armor Knight went for Karen for some reason, although I'm not sure that he could have killed Selfina. This guy wasting a physic use, that's always aggravating. And these guys have poison weapons, yeah, so you do have to be careful about that. Hot tip that I may or may not have spoken about already: if you are stuck in a chapter where somebody's poisoned and you didn't bring any antitoxins and you are low on healing, or a healer isn't in range, something you can do is rescue them. And even if it's somebody like Selfina, you can dismount and then have her rescued or whatever, and you can save somebody's life that way. That works with other status effects, by the way. Like, you know, if somebody is slept, you can pick them up. I don't recall if you can do it with Berserk. But a funny thing you can do with Berserk, actually, is if you know a unit is going to get Berserked, you can take away all their weapons, and then they won't pull a Marty and like buy a weapon or anything, so that they'll have their teeth removed. And here we this is what I was talking about when I said maybe I'm showing my hand a little bit here by attacking Fred in the previous chapter. So yeah, we're not going to be visiting the Gaiden. My personal belief is that the following Gaiden is really not worth the hassle and the risk. It's a Fog of War chapter, like nearly all Gaiden are. And the rewards aren't great. You get Fred, you get Olwen. Well, you get Fred like from the beginning of the chapter. Like, you get Olwen, who, if you don't get her, you can get like an arguably better unit later if you go a certain route. You get like... I don't think there are any treasure chests in the Gaiden, but in the chapter after that, you can visit some villages, and they will only give you treasures like a scroll and a magic ring, I think, if Olwen like survived, or if you visited the Gaiden, or something like that. And that's kind of it. It's not like some of the other Gaidens where you get like invaluable stuff, like the character Safi, or Lithis, or like a Brave Sword, or Asbel. You know, it's not like that. I like Olwen a lot, actually. Dire Thunder is fun to play around with, especially in like Chapter 14, if you've played this game. She's really useful there. But it's not necessary. I think it's a risk, honestly. I've lost units there before. And if you just kill Fred and you Fairy Leaf across this portcullis area, or whatever they call it, like I'm doing now, he never triggers the trap. I'm not sure if he triggers it if Fred is dead and you step in there while Kempf is still on the map. But I just find it easier to take the ambiguity out of it and just ferry him over. And then the next chapter is outdoor, so I don't want to dismount anybody and bring them in there. I want to deal with this with my foot units up here. And this is a decent opportunity to get Tanya involved. I think I gave her a pure water up here. But yeah, I've been playing this chapter this way for a while now, actually. I've done this on a few of my previous runs, especially Ironman's. I think it just, you know, you don't get like a staff user, you don't get any warp stays or anything. In fact, you might end up spending a warp just to complete one of the chapters. So it's, I don't know. I recommend this if you're not somebody who really cares about full recruitment or anything. Or if you just have trouble with this chapter and you just want to bypass it and you don't want to use a warp use. This is a weird chapter to warp skip anyway, because there's a bunch of units in that room up there. That bishop has like L-fire. He can hit pretty hard, I think. The mages don't move, I think. I think the armor knights do. We're about to see in a few minutes here. In the chest in the upper left, there is a torch staff. Like not an actual torch, but a torch staff. And that can be pretty useful, actually. It's not going to be useful for me right now because that we're skipping the Fog of War Gaiden. Although this next chapter we're going into is going to be Fog of War, and I think it's the only Fog of War mandatory chapter. Like just a regular chapter, not a Gaiden. And here you're seeing Tanya critting and getting ever closer to promotion, looking pretty good. This is still not the best Tanya I've ever had. That Tanya that I'm going to tell you a story when we get to one of the last chapters in the game, if we get there. Or if I die before then, I'll try and get the story in. Just about that awesome Tanya that I had, because it's absolutely ridiculous. But the last thing you have to do in this chapter is just attack Kempf. He has a one-range weapon equipped. He has 2 range in his inventory, but he won't use them. You just attack him, and then on his turn he leaves the map, and you can just seize, because he is, you know, a coward who leaves his men behind. That's the whole deal with it. I would still recommend getting the torch staff, even if you have plenty of torch, like actual torch uses and whatnot. Maybe you've bought some, just because the torch staff is very nice for like your lesser staff units to take advantage of. It's either like a D or a C staff. So some of your units that can't use anything like warp or rescue or whatever, they can be like torch guys instead, which I think is nice. But you know, what can I say? This chapter's kind of boring the way that I play it, but at least you don't have to like wait around for ballista to run out of bolts or something, or like use a warp use or whatever. The only other way that you can actually attack those ballista is by if you have Asbel's fire rank trained up so much that you can use Meteor, then sure, you can take them on that way. That takes a lot of work and a lot of preparation. You could also come in from the top. You can see that there's some doors where you can get in there. Although if you're already up to that point, then there's really not much of a point in doing that, huh? So, yeah. But once you get rid of Kempf, you just gotta seize. Make sure you do it before turn 30 if you want the Gaiden. Real quick, I'm going to talk about the name of the Gaiden here, because we're not going to be visiting it, so I won't have a chance there. The name of the Gaiden in Japanese is Murder Holes, and most or all of the translations have tried to avoid this translation, or they've like swerved around it somehow. I think one translated work called it like Murder Hollis or something like that, which is strange. I think there might be some confusion about whether a murder hole is a thing. It is absolutely a thing. You can Google it. And it's a term used for like sniper nests and things like that, which do exist in that guide. And you can see this term used in action if you play Conker's Bad Fur Day. So that's a great game that I may cover on this channel at some point. So it is absolutely murder holes, just make no mistake. But that is chapter 11. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.